The human unconscious acts as a highly pressurized system, a hidden reservoir of forbidden thoughts and suppressed urges, constantly seeking a weak point to breach the surface of our waking lives. In the autumn of 1899, Sigmund Freud was locked in the intense final stages of proofreading his masterwork, The Interpretation of Dreams. He sent the galleys to his closest confidant, Wilhelm Fliess. Fliess returned them with a peculiar, seemingly minor critique. The dream reports, he noted, were too full of jokes. That single observation forced Freud to confront an anomaly in his own research. He had to determine why the profound, deeply repressed terrain of the unconscious would choose to express itself through crude wordplay. The question derailed his focus. Freud realized that the mechanics of humor required their own dedicated structural investigation, separate from the mechanics of sleep. In his resulting text, Jokes and Their Relation to the Unconscious, Freud mapped the joke as a measurable, structural mechanism of the human mind. Prior to Freud, the intellectual landscape of humor was dominated by literary theorists like Theodore Lipps, who attempted to define the subjective experience of comedy. Lipps defined the comic as a process of contrast, a psychological expectation that is suddenly subverted, resulting in a state of bewilderment and illumination. Freud noted a severe flaw in this approach. Lipps correctly identified the resulting feeling of contrast, but he failed to map the actual internal mechanism that produces it. To truly dissect a joke, Freud abandoned subjective literary analysis. He chose instead to track the hidden, economic transactions of mental energy that occur beneath our conscious awareness. Freud anchors his linguistic analysis in an anecdote from the poet Heinrich Heine, who recalled a moment when a wealthy Jewish figure treated him, quote, familiarly. The unconscious mechanism driving this punchline is condensation with substitute formation. Condensation is a process where the mind forcefully compresses two distinct concepts together, dissolving unneeded syllables to create a single overlapping output. We can trace the conscious thought Heine originally intended to express. He treated me familiarly, but only as far as a millionaire can. This diagram shows how the mind stacks these distinct concepts, scanning the text to find points of exact linguistic overlap. The active joke work then physically compresses the two words, stripping away the less important syllables, locking the surviving letters into the final portmanteau, familiarly. Through this exact structural compression, a complex, multi-layered social critique is smuggled out of the mind inside a single, seemingly innocent word. This brings us back to Fliess's letter. The linguistic condensation used to build familiarly is the exact same tool the brain uses to construct dreams. In our sleep, the unconscious mind routinely blends the physical features of two different people into a single composite face to save mental processing power. To construct a joke, a highly rational preconscious bot deliberately drops down below the threshold of waking logic. Once submerged, the thought seeks out the mind's ancient dwelling place. It temporarily reverts to the rule-free, associative wordplay we all utilize in early childhood. Now disguised by an exterior shell of childish nonsense, the thought is propelled rapidly back up into conscious perception before waking logic has the time to dismantle it. A successful joke is a brief, highly controlled regression to childhood, engineered specifically to survive the strict scrutiny of the adult mind. The primary obstacle the adult mind faces is internal censorship. Censorship is the continuous, exhausting effort required to suppress hostile, inappropriate, or forbidden thoughts. This maps Freud's concept of inhibitory cathexis, the volume of mental energy a person spends to maintain internal censorship over a specific thought. The joke work's linguistic facade acts as a Trojan horse, successfully bypassing the mind's censorship checkpoints, instantly dropping the suppression energy to zero. This triggers a physiological result. The mental energy that the brain actively mobilized to suppress the thought is suddenly rendered unnecessary. It has nowhere to go but out. Freud defines the physical pleasure of laughter as the literal economic discharge of saved psychic energy, the volume of effort we successfully avoided spending on censorship. Having mapped the internal mechanics, Freud shifts his focus to the external rules of social interaction, drawing a hard boundary between constructed jokes and the broader category of the comic. This graph illustrates the structure of the comic. The comic is a simple, self-contained, two-way relationship based purely on visual or situational observation. If you observe someone tripping on the sidewalk, you process the visual contrast and you laugh entirely alone. You require zero external validation to discharge the energy. An isolated joke, however, is a failed joke. The psychic circuit of der Witz cannot be completed by a single person. This diagram reveals the mandatory architecture of a joke, a rigid, inescapable three-person circuit. This architecture addresses a central paradox. The creator of a joke cannot genuinely laugh at their own punchline. Their psychic energy is entirely consumed by the joke work, condensing words and building the facade. They have no surplus energy left to discharge as pleasure. To complete the circuit, the creator must physically transmit the idea to a third person, passing the burden of the energetic decision to a new host. There is a strict prerequisite for this transfer: psychical accord. Psychical accord dictates the listener must possess the exact same cultural and psychological inhibitions as the creator. The listener hears the joke. Their internal censorship is triggered, but the joke's facade instantly dissolves it, freeing their unspent energy into a burst of laughter. Only through observing this vicarious discharge in the listener can the original creator finally experience the leftover pleasure of their own creation. A joke operates as a highly engineered, unconscious vehicle designed to smuggle forbidden thoughts. It relies on an equally repressed accomplice to trigger the final, pleasurable release of psychological tension.